It's all interconnected. We're already talking about white supremacy, so just put the patriarchy in there.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
I know it's still like February, like the middle of February. Oh my gosh, it's already the middle of February. But like my allergies are already trying to kill me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it'd be your own body, really.
So like there's extra sniffling on this episode. I apologize to literally anyone that listens to this, and most of all you.
Oh, it's all good. I'm sure a lot of us are aware of the allergy struggle. I certainly have had my fair share of allergy troubles lately.
Yeah. So what has been going on this week for you?
Oh, it's Tuesday. It feels like maybe Thursday. Hey, Hannah got a sneeze.
Yes, finally. Sweet relief. And yet, still no.
And yet, yeah, sinuses are the worst.
We are fine.
What's up with you?
You know, it's been a weird week. It's been a weird couple of weeks. There was another Asian woman that was brutally murdered. Her name was Christina Lee, and she was a 35-year-old woman that was followed up 6 flights of stairs in her apartment and stabbed 40 times.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Did they get the person who did it?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's not a good look, because the suspect, the person that they arrested, was a Black man and had presenting mental health issues, and so it's just the whole situation is just not good.
And they didn't know the victim. Okay.
So like between this and Michelle Go, who was also pushed in front of a train about 4 weeks ago by another person who was experiencing homelessness that also was presenting with mental health issues. It's not good.
Right.
It really isn't.
Yeah.
So just been dealing with a lot of that recently, on top of the sinuses. But it's really hard to kind of see like what's going on in New York right now, because a lot of people have been using this opportunity to perpetuate anti-Blackness and also like ableism, and stigmatizing like the differently abled community, and it's so interesting to see that people are not like looking at the root causes of it, which they're all interconnected. People just try to blame one population or another, and unfortunately, like it's like all minority populations are taking turns being the scapegoat right now. And it's not good.
No, it definitely, I think, speaks to a larger problem that we see in every area when it comes to equity and justice. And it's the fact that we're so focused on pointing fingers as opposed to actually figuring out how to solve.
Yeah, like I love how like this week we kind of really delve into more history. Like we did it with Kendi, but I feel like with Acho right now we're really going to just get in there, because these are the last 2 chapters of section 2, and Acho does not hold back.
No, he does not hold back. He is tired.
Like 100%. So what?
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say I could read the question. but
yes,
whatever
please.
you were.
My nose is about to like kill me, so please.
So while Hannah's dealing with that, America claims to have abolished slavery generations ago, but with a lack of public investment in Black communities, directly contributing to high prison populations and prisons often benefiting from the free labor of their inmates. Did we ever truly abolish slave labor, or has the 13th Amendment simply provided prison owners with a loophole? Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
Was there anything that stood out to you in this chapter?
I love how like this really tries to tackle the prison industrial complex because so many of our products that we use every single day, from like toothpaste to like deodorant to those are just two that I'm thinking of right now, are like actually made by prison labor at less than minimum wage. So like it's not technically slave labor, but it's not good.
Yeah. I like that he said did the 13th Amendment create a loophole, because like to me it absolutely did. I mean, I think in another chapter he talks about this specific wording where it's like you can't have slave labor, and then there's like unless someone has been incarcerated for something or something along those lines. So absolutely state-sponsored slave labor.
And here's the thing, like it's state-sponsored and people know that this is happening, and yet there is not enough being done for prison reform.
Yes. Go ahead.
Sorry. And I was just going to add in there, and minority populations are overrepresented in our prison system.
Yeah, so tie that to like the history of slave labor and the fact that slaves historically were Africans who were brought without any type of consent. And so now overpopulated prisons, mostly with Black and brown people. It's not a coincidence.
Nope. And like while people try to like explain it away, they're like, by what Acho mentions here, by reducing them to like words like thugs. And what was the word that Clinton called them? Super predators. Super predators. Like that's such a dehumanizing like label. It's just a way to further dehumanize Black and brown bodies. And he, yeah. Oh my God. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and like, it's not new for this country. Unfortunately, it is not. And I'm sniffling again, so you talk.
Yeah, definitely. He talks about super predator, and then he talks about thug, and he talks about how those terms really caught on. And it's like, of course they caught on. It is a way to enable racist thoughts. It's like, oh, this is why I think this. It piggybacks perfectly off a very racist society.
We've already talked about like implicit bias. So this is just confirmation bias of things that people have already internalized, which it's been internalized within our society since the very beginning.
It's just a mess. I remember reading, I think it was an article. No, it was a video. I think it was on NPR. If I can find it, I'll certainly link it. And it was talking about there's this community where like 90% of the voters are people incarcerated in a local prison. And the representative who was voted in, because in certain states, prisoners don't have the right to vote, which is another problem. But I think the 10% who did vote the representative in, of course, they were represented and they had a good relationship with the representative, but the representative had been in office for, I think, 10 plus years. Again, I have not read the article in a while, and had never visited the prison, which is like 90% of their the people that they represent never visited the prison.
And what's crazy is that prison incarcerated populations count towards census data, which counts towards like funding for like schools, roads, police, but they can't even vote.
They can't vote. I think this brings like points into like a really important conversation of human rights, because right now it's like you get rid of all your rights if you get incarcerated, which, as we know, people, Black and brown people, are more likely to be incarcerated. So it's intentional. So I really do think we have to relook, okay, what are human rights? Whether you're incarcerated, whether you're not, what, like, depending on, it doesn't matter what circumstance, you always have these rights, because right now they're very iffy. They're very sketchy. They are not well outlined.
Like, the US has the second largest prison population in the world, second to China.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, to me, the fact that there are private prisons, people make money off prisons, that just absolutely points to how it's a problem. I mean, why? How? All of the questions. Why can people profit off prisons? And then, knowing our very wonderful capitalist society, if there's money to be made, then there's so much investment in that.
The idea that people do not see the correlation between like literal prison labor and for-profit prisons, like, if anyone out there listening goes down this rabbit hole, I strongly encourage, like, I don't know, like a therapy, like weighted blanket to accompany you on this journey, because it's not pretty.
It's so heartbreaking and disgusting.
Like, whenever we talk about justice reform and like police reform, like, a lot of the times you hear about, like, with the case of George Floyd, you hear, and Breonna Taylor, and now Amir Locke, you hear about people just sleeping in their homes and getting murdered. And we're talking about that, but we're also talking about the inhumane treatment of Black and brown bodies within the prison systems too. It's all the same system. And whenever people are literally just asking for the right to live, like, it really shouldn't surprise people that, like, we're fighting for people's right to live, and that's the baseline. And we haven't even touched the prison industrial complex.
Yeah, that's why it's like, whenever people try to make Black Lives Matter political, it's like, no, this is a matter of human rights. Like, you could go to the UN and file a case because human rights are being completely infringed on.
It's just, where do you even start with this?
Yeah, because I heard about Amir Locke, and I was just like, I hadn't had words. It took so much time to just be like, wow.
He was literally asleep.
He was sleeping. I have no idea where we start. Definitely with implicit biases, definitely with voting, all of the things. But it's heavy.
It is. And like, whenever Acho's talking about how the label of thug and gangs, and people use that bias and that fear to get more funding for police reform. And people don't realize that police patrols were first, like, created as like slave patrols to go and like catch runaway slaves. Like, the history of that entire system, of this entire system in this country, literally was founded on just completely just running over human rights and the right to life of literal human beings. So where, like, how can a system like that had the beginnings of literally killing Black and brown bodies, how do you reform that? Like, in my opinion, you don't reform it.
Yeah, because it's so implemented. I mean, look at what happens when you're like, Black Lives Matter, and then police forces. Now, of course, there were cops who stood with Black Lives Matter, but then you have police forces who held press conferences and cried because they were trying to take away our police.
And then you have like the other side of that when the January 6th like insurrection happened, and officers literally, like, I don't know if the data has been released on that because it's only a year old, but, and I don't know if they've been tracking it, but several officers have actually killed themselves since the January 6th riots. Like, more than, I want to say more than 2. So that right there is enough for me as someone who would like to get to the bottom of that, would like to research, at least in a case study, is there a correlation?
Because that is so interesting.
Yeah, Capitol police officers actually committing suicide. I saw, was it Washington Post or New York Times? One of those two publications was reporting on that. And then people also just don't talk enough about Officer Eugene Goodman either. Whenever they try to use the not all cops are bad, like, why do they use a not all cops, Blue Lives Matter, but their poster children are these white cops being like, hey, look, we're not bad guys. But then like actual people like Eugene Goodman are not spoken about.
Yeah, I think it definitely, the system. There can be good cops in a bad system because the system is bad. It was never meant for anyone who wasn't a white man. Like, that is how it is. And so I get so much pushback when I'm like, I don't trust them. But the case, like, I mean, you think about, I've never been through police training, but if their job is to be assertive and to use force, and then they're taught the same implicit biases that we're taught, then that's dangerous.
I think that Brooklyn Nine-Nine definitely tackles a lot of, I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. There are some critiques to be said about it, but I do think that it did a very good job of tackling the struggles of police of color within these communities and the internal struggles that they go through. And then I think there was one episode where Terry got, it was a stop and frisk, and Terry, who is a sergeant, literally was just like, I got stopped by just your everyday cop because I'm a Black man walking in my neighborhood, and they thought that I didn't deserve to be in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And he wrote a formal complaint. And then there was pushback against that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I don't know if I'll ever forget that episode. It is a great show. But specifically that episode, I thought they tackled it really well, because then his captain was like, maybe you shouldn't. And he was like, why wouldn't he want me to? And there was just so many aspects.
Exactly. So, like, there are good people within a corrupt system, but the whole system needs a freaking overhaul.
Yes. I think it's very clear that the system has never, I mean, it wasn't really intended to work. And so because it never was intended to work, it is now doing a lot of harm. So something needs to change.
Yeah, they just like keep pumping money into it, keep pumping money and bodies into it. And it's not good.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's like, oh, I forgot my analogy. Continue, sorry.
It'll come back, hopefully.
Ugh, my brain.
So defund the police. He mentioned, no, he doesn't. He mentions how black on black crime, Emmanuel Acho mentions how black on black crime is misleading without context. My question is, do you think defund the police is misleading without context?
I think if people, like, it depends on what people equate police with. Because, like, whenever I was a little kid growing up in Woodway, Texas, my friend's dad was the police chief. So I always saw the police chief as, oh, it's cool. Like, so and so's dad is going to go make curly fries at our school's, like, cookout.
Yeah.
Yay. Like, it was one of those communities that I grew up in. And so we never saw police as a bad entity because it was my friend's dad. Whereas, like, other people, like, they see the police and they, like, think, oh my gosh, these people are going to, like, just completely run over all of my human rights. I'm going to be harassed. I'm going to be what's the word? I forgot, but, like, let's just say harassed at the very least. At the very most, like, we've seen what happens. People get killed. And the more that we see all of these being, like, blown up in news stories, like, thinking of all the ones that aren't caught on camera, like, it's not just a few bad apples.
Right.
And I think the misleading thing about that people will think about, oh, defund the police is a far leftist notion that, like, they just want complete and utter chaos. I think it speaks a lot to the people's, like, biases, like internal biases, and their fear of safety for their own selves and their property. Like, I can't think of another reason why people would be opposed to defunding the police. And, like, whenever people are saying defund the police and they think that that means they're defunding communities, whenever we do say defund the police, we're talking about funding for public school, funding for housing, funding for communities. Like, police are not the only way to build a community. Police are a way to build a police state.
Yes, I snaps to that. I love that response.
Thank you. Like, what did you think about, like, whenever Acho mentioned the history of the gang violence in America and the thugs, and how Acho just dispels, like, all of that, just takes it all and just puts it into nice little bite-sized pieces, like a little popcorn shrimp.
Yes, he did a fantastic job. I mean, and I think the overarching thing is, I'm trying to think, because growing up, I was definitely taught that, like, gangs were something dangerous, something to avoid. But thank goodness for growth is all I can say. I have a different perspective now. And I think Emmanuel Acho talks really, I think he really hits the point. And it's like, you got to think about, like, why people are joining gangs. It's a form of protection. I mean, we all come from different backgrounds, and it's so easy to look, like we do, a lot of people of color look from the outside in and judge what's going on. You have no idea what it's like to be that person. You have no idea why they felt like they had to join a gang. You have no idea their history, and just understanding all of that intersectionality, I think, is really helpful. And I think he does a great job of touching that.
See, like, the thing that I still don't understand, that people don't understand, like, if I could just be like, all right, captive audience, and you're all going to listen to me rant for 20 minutes straight. One of the conclusions I would literally draw would be poverty is a greater indicator of incarceration and crime than skin color. But if you look at the history of this country, how much systemic and systematic racism have kept people of color in poverty.
Right.
we're not talking about like Wordle or the New York Times crossword type of like logic here. We are talking about, oh, look at those stars. There's the Big Dipper. It's a cup. Line, draw.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very clear for sure. I will also add, because you said, I'm not going to lose my point. You said that poverty is the greatest. Oh, going back to our original point, they've started to protect their communities from the police. Okay. Why do communities of color need protection from the police?
Because the system is rigged. Police can't be prosecuted in a lot of districts. Police like are literally above the law in some places. Like, what is the proper term for it? Oh my gosh, I forgot what it was called.
What are you trying to describe?
Whenever police misconduct actually gets caught and someone wants to bring a civil suit against the precinct, but it always goes to internal reviews, internal investigations. The officer who is accused is put on paid desk duty or leave, or like has to go to anger management. Also, if you're in anger management and you are licensed, literally legally sanctioned to hold a gun, sir or ma'am, or person, just putting that out there.
Because I've been through gun training for the concealer permit, and they say that in order to, like, if you shoot someone and then they're going through the investigation, you have to prove that someone else would do the same thing in that position. And so if you have anger management issues, I feel like that messes with your ability to make that decision.
People also don't look at the correlation between domestic violence and police officers.
Yeah, because it's a position of power. So if you abuse your power, it's going to show up in different ways, for sure. That was a great point.
It's all interconnected. We're already talking about white supremacy, so just put the patriarchy in there.
Yeah. Yes, for sure plays a role in it.
Yeah.
Going back to how police are above the law, I think he talks about Black on Black crime. My brother brought up this really good point, and I hate giving him props, but he brought it up and he got it from Killer Mike. So give Killer Mike his props also. The difference, like, Black on Black crime is not a thing, because if a Black person kills a Black person, said Black person goes to jail. This police brutality is like, shouldn't happen, is really awful. And one of the big things is there are no consequences. You just kill Black bodies and go on administrative leave or move to another precinct.
We have actual like reports and investigations of police precincts also not investigating, like, whenever it's a Black or brown person that is killed by a white person, as like rough as it is, or is not as oh my gosh, detailed.
That's a good one.
The word where they actually put effort into investigations. It's not as heavily investigated as whenever it is a white person that is killed. Missing white women syndrome. We've talked about it with the Gabby Petito case, how there are, I don't want to misrepresent the numbers, but like there are X amount more of Black and brown women missing and Indigenous women missing than white girls missing. But it's always the white girls that get the cold case files, the like Nightline 2020, like it.
Yeah, it's not coincidental. I think, and maybe that's what the problem is. People think, oh, like that just happened, but it's not coincidental. I mean, you see it. And I mean, that goes back to, I always forget the name of this movie that was mad racist way back when, that really set the precedence for the very vulnerable, very innocent white woman. And that has been played, what is it? That's been played out multiple times though. You see, like, I mean, just point to a point in history where a Black man gets in trouble for looking at a white woman and she screams and his life's over. And through 30 years down the road, she says, oh, it wasn't true.
Oh, Emmett Till?
Yeah. But there's so many examples. Of course, that's like a tragic example for sure, but there's so many.
Yeah, there are so many examples. And then there's like on the other side of that, there are so many times when a woman of color or a female presenting person of color will accuse a white man of something, and then that person is ostracized, that person is blacklisted, that person is like, oh, are you sure? Like, it's also the patriarchy.
It's 100%. I mean, that goes into that really dark, very uncomfortable, very awful Me Too, where women just aren't believed. No. Think about Anita Hill. You think about so many women who've come forth and have been completely tarnished for telling their truth.
Yeah. And like, that is something that like we talk about power dynamics whenever it's a white woman, and you see it all the time in the news and things like that. But women of color have been abused by white men for so long. I'm not gonna like point us towards another rabbit hole, but also look up like the sex industry whenever it comes to American military bases, foreign military bases. You heard it here. You heard it here, folks. Not first. I'm not the first one to draw that line or that correlation. Right. But just another fun thing to look at. And there's also been, I follow a couple of female theologians whenever it comes to purity culture and Black and brown women of color being seen as more sinful, more sensual, more like sexual beings because of the color of their skin. And like white is like correlated with purity, and you're just like, what the actual bleep?
Yeah, the fact that white is the color that you think of when you think about purity. You get baptized and you come up in a white suit or a white dress. When you get married, a woman wears a white dress. It is so racist. It's like embedded in racism and sexism, because like it is not the same. The pressures for women and men when it comes to purity, which I kind of like hate that word now, it's not the same.
I love reading works by decolonizing and deconstructing theologians. I'm not saying that all Christianity is bad, but as someone that grew up in the church and has primarily seen white men leading the charge whenever it comes to Christianity, I'm just kind of like, I don't think that's the way to go, people.
Right. I definitely think there needs to be some deconstructing. It's so whitewashed. It's so sexist. I mean, so many things. And if you think about, I think religion is the problem. Spirituality, your relationship with whoever your higher power is fine. And I mean, like, I can only speak for Christianity, but it is the structures they're man-made. So they are mad problematic, and they're based in patriarchy and sexism and racism, because those people created these systems.
I need to send you this link to a sweatshirt of someone that I love and follow on Twitter, but they are selling sweatshirts that say your Jesus isn't white. And I'm like, I want it. I want it so bad.
I love it.
We have covered a lot for that chapter.
That one chapter?
That was one chapter.
That's funny. Okay.
My sinuses are finally cleared up. So is it all right if I read the next one?
Go for it.
Ooh. Why do you think many African American communities are plagued with poverty, crime, and also the lack of presence of a father figure in the home? Is this all because of oppression? Oh, Lisa. So many things. Oh,
I'm just gonna completely defer to Emmanuel Acho because I think he handled this so well. He didn't just yell and scream and curse people out, which I feel would have also been appropriate. He like used facts and was really understanding, which I appreciate.
Like, I had to bite my tongue just reading that. If someone were to come up to me and ask me that in real life, I would not be able to keep a straight face or refrain from trying to kick them in the shin. I'm a short person. I will kick people in the shin. How I do it.
It's just, I mean, that question is loaded with so much racism and so many assumptions that it's like, you got to do a little work before we can even talk, because there's a lot of work to be done for you to be asking a question like this.
Acho definitely changed the names of these people, right? If I was in a book for asking a question that dumb, I would just be like, all right, bye people, I'm changing my name.
It would be funny if he like screenshot the emails and was like, and put them on the book. It was like, this person and their email is this.
Yes. Lisa. Lisa. I think we've already talked about poverty and crime, but do we want to talk about the racist notion of the quote unquote broken family home? What's it called? Trope. That's what we're talking about. Yes. The broken family home trope.
Oh, I think he does a great job. And he comes from an interesting perspective because he's Nigerian. He's Nigerian American. So he goes, well, I mean, you like to put it on and say that this is just like this race, this is how it is so false. And I can tell you, not only from America, but also if you go back to the motherland, then like familial ties are so strong.
Makes me want to chew on this microphone. Like, because here's the thing. I grew up in an area where people would assume that Black and brown people came from broken homes. And by broken homes, that is like a very racist and horrifying heteronormative definition of a female presenting parent, male presenting parent, 2.5 white picket fence family, which not all families look like that.
No.
So take your heteronormative like ideas and kindly go like shove them far away from me.
Yes, yeah, I think debunking that is very important because not all homes are the same. And that's what, I mean, that's the diversity, and that's what makes things so interesting and makes things so beautiful, that we come from different backgrounds. If only we could appreciate that more.
Like, I love how Acho like really delved into the history and the aftermath of what like slavery was, because it wasn't just like boom, no more slavery, bye bye. We had all of the sharecropping and the what was it also called? I'm losing my mind right now. But it was the following the Civil War, thousands of Black people set to reunite with their families. And I appreciate him as someone who like really just is not a historian,
Mhm.
like going in as a historian, because I'm a history nerd. Where is it? Sharecroppers. Yeah, sharecroppers.
Yeah.
That like basically put them at a disadvantage, and it was just slavery in another name.
Because America can't do without some form of slavery, as we are now seeing.
Oh.
Take a deep breath, drink some water. I also appreciate how he talks about how, like, intentionally families weren't really a thing in slavery. They couldn't be, because at any moment someone could be sold and then boom. And then so he talks about how after Juneteenth and after everything was signed and people were free, then people literally had to travel to go find their families because they had been moved from wherever they were when they were able to create the family. So let's just let's just understand what we're assuming, and let's remember what Black people have been through in this country.
That's like me punching someone in the face and saying, "Why do you have a bruise on your face?"
Yeah.
Come on, people.
Yes.
These are not very hard conclusions to draw.
Mm-mm. It's also, and he talks about how it's so damaging to Black people knowing that that's an assumption that people make. I mean, I forgot the 3 things, but my professor perfectly lined them out, where it's like people believe it, and then you begin to believe it, and then you kind of act in it because you think that's all you are. It's like words have so much power.
When you internalize it.
Yes.
When you internalize it. Not to be the Broadway nerd, which also struggles with racism, but everything struggles with racism. This is a fun thing. And by fun, I mean we're in hell. Anyways, so one of my favorite musicals, Wicked, draws a fun, and by fun, I mean it's hell, analogy of animals not having rights, because it's like anthropomorphic talking animals. And so whenever the animals say, whenever you're treated like an animal and you're told not to speak and not to speak up for your rights, that's what you become and that's what you believe. And then the animals like lose their power of speech over it and just become animals.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's an analogy. It's an analogy of, if you treat a human like a bleeping bleep animal, people are going to internalize that. So don't treat a freaking human like an animal.
Yeah, it all goes back to human rights and what we're all deserving of. Human rights. It's not too much to ask.
What blows my mind is, historically speaking, white people didn't believe that people of color were actually human.
Yeah.
Until very recent history.
Yeah. The fact, and I mean, like, thinking about how, and I mean, does everyone really understand that now? If you think about, like, a slave was 3/5 a person. That was legal. So tell me that system can somehow magically turn into something where everyone's treated equally. It can't.
The prison population is definitely counted in the census, but they're not allowed to vote.
Yeah.
How is that different from the 3/5 compromise?
It's not. It's a modern day 3/5 compromise. It's really messy. And so that's why I say I think Emmanuel Acho did a really good job just laying out the facts and staying upbeat and really educating people without completely yelling, which I think he had every right to do.
Like, not only yell, but also just be like, are you an idiot? like, do you have no empathy? Because also, like, single parent households are not exclusive to Black and brown families.
Yeah.
You don't hear people talking crap about white single parent households.
And they exist.
They exist, people.
Mm-hmm.
There is no perfect definition of family, and if you say otherwise, I will get angry.
He talks about how with crime, which might be going back to the past chapter, but when you think about crime and you think about how Black and brown people are like the poster people for crime, but then you think about the crimes that white people do and they haven't been completely severed to the title of like being troublemakers or the crime that they committed. They still get to be people apart from that. And it's like, that is also very intentional, because there's no way that this label gets tacked onto this group of people and they can never outlive it. And then if this white guy does something, it's like, oh, but he's still this person.
Some of the most horrific murders and serial killers in history have been white people, white men. Yeah. You don't see white men getting hit with the label of, you're a freaking serial killer. Mm-mm. No, they get to run Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah. And I thought about like tax fraud or embezzling of like millions and millions of dollars. Those are usually white men. But do we bat an eye? Do we call them awful names and dehumanize them? No.
I love how Mark Zuckerberg is like solely responsible for like the decline of society due to social media. But like, sorry, I totally interrupted you.
I was just gonna say before you made this fantastic point. It's not that they should be dehumanized. It's the empathy. Oh my gosh, the empathy and the compassion and the understanding that is shown to white men should be shown to everyone. You know, treat humans like humans. Nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. And when white men make mistakes, they're forgiven. Or they actually get something. Well, actually, they don't even have to do anything. Most of the time, it's like a slap on the wrist.
They get rewarded.
Yeah. So if you can show empathy to one group, you can show empathy to another.
Yeah. People just don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. We're fine. It is fine. Like, and like going back to like the family thing, something that I'm actually going through right now is like debating on whether or not I should like do a DNA test. And this is an adoptee like perspective. Mm-hmm. But like that can be pretty traumatizing for literally anyone that's not white.
Yes.
Because of how many populations have been abused by white people. There was a scene in The Office where Andy, this white guy that goes to Cornell, literally gets his DNA test back. And they're like, and he's like, y'all, I'm related to Michelle Obama. And they were like,
this is why I can't do The Office. I've heard so many good things, but I've seen maybe like half of 2 episodes, and it's so cringe.
And later in the episode, he's like, Mom, Dad, did our family own slaves? And he was like, no, guys, they didn't own slaves. They just transported them. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so bad.
Going back to your original point, it takes me back to Elizabeth Warren. And one of the things she talked about, because all the Democratic nominees, they kind of fessed up to whatever they had in their closet, all the skeletons before they ran, just so nothing could be like thrown in their face. And her thing was, or the thing I remember, was her claiming Native American ancestry. And she like posted her DNA results, and people were like, are you serious?
Like, that is not the like awesome, I'm a cool person flex you think it is.
Yeah.
Like, my adoptive family, They were landowners, are still landowners in Texas since the 1800s. I don't want to go digging.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Yeah, you're more likely to find something very discouraging.
Just a little. Which also brings me to another point about adoptees of color. If you don't follow Hannah Jackson Matthews on Instagram, get your phone right now and follow Hannah Jackson Matthews, because she does an amazing educating piece about the racist statement that why don't Black couples adopt Black kids, leaving a bunch of like white people to adopt Black kids and be white saviors? Why aren't like they're more like Black foster families? Hannah Jackson Matthews, people.
Okay, is that her handle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll link her.
Oh,
because I think we all need to read that piece.
The amount of family separation that's been perpetuated by white people. Yo, white people have done a ton of damage.
Yeah, I remember in one of our summer sessions, people came in and they were talking about family separation when kids are literally dragged from their family in court because of there's a thing, and if people are deemed not okay to parent their kids, then they get separated. But anyway, my point in saying that is they were talking about how you've got social workers, school social workers, you've got deputies in schools, you've got counselors, all these resources for kids, but ultimately because they're mandated reporters, you've got these kids going in and then telling about whatever's going on at home, and these are more access points for them to be taken from their parents. It's like little traps that are mandated reporters, and so if they hear something, then they have to report it, and then maybe the kid will be removed from home, and like society kind of sets them up for that.
Yeah. And if a kid is talking about how, like, I've seen cases where like people have been penalized and their children have been removed for not having heat in the home. But guess what? They can't pay their bills because the bills are astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of, hey, let's work out a way for you to pay your bill, or I don't know, let's not make a human right, which is electricity, that expensive.
Yeah.
Or privatized. Looking at you, Con Ed. My electricity bill just came today. And then penalize them by taking their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just fix the electricity.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't seem like, why is a kid being removed for not having heat? That's crazy. Like the tiny things that are picked apart in specifically families of color and used against them.
Because the child welfare system is also a branch of the military and police industrial complex. It's a fun thing to learn about, people.
Yeah.
This isn't fun.
I was going to say, on a lighter note, Emmanuel Acho, he lists some resources in the past chapter, and he's just like different resources. He talks about Pin America, where you could read the writings from people who are incarcerated. I recommend it. I've read some incredible pieces. And then he also talks about getting a better idea of like the Black family. If you're more curious, he talks about If Beale Street Could Talk. I did not read the book, but I watched the movie. Regina King's in it. It is amazing. Definitely recommend it.
I need to get back on my reading kick. This is literally the only book that is in my reading queue right now. I need to do it.
You've got some recommendations.
I do. And also, I got the 1619 project for Christmas. So.
Oh.
Well, you ready for Part 3. We.
Yes. I read the first question. Very interesting. Excited about the second question.
Yes. So do you want to read the first question for next week?
I can do that.
Yeah.
The first question will be, I am a white man who's married to a Black woman. We have 2 beautiful children. Being a white man, I cannot begin to know the pressures of being Black in America. As a father to interracial children, I fear I cannot adequately prepare them for the future. How can I explain to my son and daughter that life will be harder for them than it was for me? Kevin.
Oh, Kevin. You're on the right track.
Yes.
That's a step in the right direction. Way to
Yes.
go, Kevin. I'm not so excited about this next question.
Okay.
They didn't even put their full name on there for a good reason. Why aren't the people obeying direct orders from the police? Why are they resisting arrest? Any light you could shed on this would be greatly appreciated. E.
E?
Just E.
Oh, E. Maybe that's the future of this book. Like one really dope, in-depth question and one really problematic one.
How could someone make it that far in this book and still ask that?
To not end on that note, because that would really make me sad. We were talking about how we did not know Asian pioneers, and that made me really sad. So today I'm going to, I wonder, can I share my screen?
I'm gonna make you a an administrator. Allow make host. There you are.
Let's see.
So you can share your screen now.
For people who are okay, there we go. For people who are watching on YouTube, I mean, I guess you can't really see it, but here it is. We're gonna highlight Yuri Kochiyama. And I know about this woman because she was actually, I think she was mentioned in Malcolm X's book. She was born in San Pedro, California. She is of Japanese ancestry. Her father was, and they were all put in concentration camps. And when she was, I think she was younger, and her father was the victim of some racism. She's known for her human rights activism. She worked in Harlem. She worked with like across all types of groups. And she started the Asian, I want to say it right, Asian Americans for Action. And then she was there when Malcolm X was murdered. And there's a picture of her like cradling his head. So but I'm not gonna end on that note because that's really sad. We're gonna highlight Yuri Kochiyama because she was an amazing woman.
That is awesome. Also, I momentarily forgot that America totally incarcerated Japanese Americans during World War II. Forgot about that for a second. It's not good that I forgot about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think our history classes did a great job of really having us understand the depth of that, but that is why we are here.
That is. And it's so good to see you as always. I'm so happy that my sinuses finally cleared up.
I know.
Alrighty. I will see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this video. We are so grateful for your support. Make sure you like it, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. We'd love to engage with you. If you'd like to keep up with us, all of our socials are in the bio. We are on all of the social media platforms. And we look forward to seeing you next video.